You may not believe that poverty can push a man toward choices that make his heart pound with fear and tremble with hope at the same time. You may not believe that sometimes fate knocks on our door in ways no one could ever predict. But it's the truth. And this is the story of Darius Washington. Darius was a single father working as a janitor at the headquarters of Sterling Capital in Houston, Texas, a man whom life had pushed all the way to the edge. A tall black man with broad shoulders and close-cropped hair, Darius woke up every morning before the sun even had the chance to rise. Not because of an alarm clock, but because of the dry cough coming from the small room next door. Maya, his 6-year-old daughter with warm brown skin and curly hair that bounced when she laughed, carried a congenital heart condition that needed urgent surgery. And Darius, he had nothing but a pair of calloused hands and a mountain of medical debt weighing on him like the sky collapsing on his shoulders. Darius's life hadn't always been this bleak. 3 years ago, he had a family. A small house in suburban Houston, a steady job at an auto repair shop, and a wife he believed would walk with him for the rest of his life, Keisha. But everything fell apart the day the doctor told them Maya needed heart surgery. A surgery that costs more than $200,000. Insurance wouldn't cover it, and Keisha... She looked at Darius with cold eyes and said a sentence that felt like someone squeezing his heart until it cracked. "I can't live like this anymore." She left. Not because she didn't love Maya, but because she wasn't strong enough to stand in the middle of a storm that big. She chose another life, with another man, in another city. And Darius, he stayed, because that was the only thing he knew how to do. He sold the house, paid off a portion of the debt, moved into a cramped apartment on the east side of the city, and took a janitor position at Sterling Capital, one of the largest financial corporations in Texas, simply because the pay was slightly higher, and they allowed him to work night shifts so he could be with Maya during the day. Every night, when the skyscraper sank into silence, Darius wiped every glass panel, polished every marble floor, cleaned offices so luxurious he knew he would never sit in them. And every night when he walked past the 47th floor, the top floor of the building, he always saw a light still on. It was the office of Victoria Sterling. Victoria wasn't just the CEO of Sterling Capital. She was the owner, the heiress, the most powerful female billionaire in Texas. Rumor had it she could buy an entire town without blinking. That she once fired an executive simply because he dared to look her in the eye. That she had never smiled in front of any employee. Darius had never spoken to her. He had never even been within 10 meters of her. For a man like him, Victoria Sterling belonged to another world. A world of private jets, lavish galas, and decisions that could change the fate of thousands. But everything changed one night in October. That night, Darius was wiping the stairs on the 46th floor when his phone buzzed. It was the hospital. The nurse's voice made his heart stop. "Mr. Washington, Maya's condition is worsening. The doctor says the surgery can't wait any longer. We need your answer within a week." Darius collapsed onto the steps, the phone still in his hand. 1 week. He needed $200,000 in 1 week, and his bank account didn't even have $300. He had no idea how long he sat there, maybe a few minutes, maybe an hour. Tears streamed down his dark face, and he didn't bother wiping them away. Then a voice, cold, sharp as a blade, echoed above him. "What are you doing here?" Darius looked up. Victoria Sterling stood at the top of the staircase, staring down at him. A perfect black suit, blonde hair in a tight bun, icy blue eyes. She was everything he was not. Pale, polished, powerful. I'm sorry, ma'am." Darius jumped to his feet, hastily wiping his tears. "I'll get back to work right away." But Victoria didn't leave. She stood there, looking at him as if she were reading an open book. "You work the night shift, correct?" "Yes, ma'am. Darius Washington. I've been here 8 months. Victoria stayed silent for a moment, then spoke. Her voice not loud, but powerful enough to hush the entire stairwell. "Tomorrow morning, 7 a. My office. Before he could ask anything, she turned away, the sound of her heels echoing through the vast, empty space. That night, Darius couldn't sleep. He lay on the old sofa, staring at the peeling ceiling, wondering what he had done wrong. Was she going to fire him for crying on the job? If he lost this job, what else did he have left? At 7 the next morning, Darius stood in front of the glass doors of the 47th floor. He had never seen this place during the day. Texas sunlight poured through the massive windows, making the office look like a palace. Victoria's secretary let him in. The office was as big as his entire apartment. Marble floors, a black oak desk, a full wall of glass overlooked Houston, where other buildings looked like miniature toys. Victoria sat behind her desk. She didn't invite him to sit. She simply looked at him, then pushed a brown leather briefcase forward. "Open it." Darius took the briefcase with trembling hands. Inside was a thick folder, and the moment he flipped to the first page, his heart nearly stopped. It was Maya's medical file, the diagnosis, the treatment plan, the surgery cost, every detail. Where did you get this?" Darius choked. Victoria didn't answer. She stood, walked toward the window, her back facing him. "I can help your daughter, Darius. I can pay for the entire surgery, erase all your debts, give you and your child a new home, a new life." Darius stood frozen, as if his soul had left his body. What he heard was too big to be real. Then Victoria turned, her blue eyes sharp and cold. "But in return," she said, each word falling like metal hitting the ground, "you must give me something. Something money can't buy." The room suddenly felt so heavy that Darius could barely breathe. What is it, ma'am?" Victoria walked closer. Close enough for him to smell her expensive perfume. Close enough for him to see the tired folds around her eyes. And in a voice that didn't tremble at all, she said, "I want you to give me a child." If you're still listening at this point, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next part, where the truth behind Victoria's offer begins to unfold. But what Darius doesn't know is that the real reason Victoria needs a child is far more bitter and dangerous than he could ever imagine. Can you guess what it is? We will continue right after this. Darius stood there like a statue. He was certain he had misheard. "Ma'am, I don't understand." Victoria returned to her desk, sitting down with the poise of someone far too familiar with controlling everything around her. "You heard me perfectly well, Darius. I don't like repeating myself. But why? You could have anyone. You could... What?" Victoria cut him off, her voice sharp. "Hire a surrogate? Find a man from the upper class? Do you think I haven't tried?" She opened a drawer and pulled out another file, thicker than Maya's. 15 years, Darius. 15 years I've been searching for a man I could trust. And do you know what I found?" She tossed the file onto the desk. Papers spilled out. Covert photos, prenuptial contracts, private investigation reports. The first one, a lawyer in Dallas, secretly signed a deal with a rival firm right before proposing to me. The second, a doctor, supposedly respectable, turned out to be dating 3 other women at the same time. The third... Victoria paused. For the first time, Darius saw something different in her eyes. Not anger, pain. The third was William Prescott, son of a prestigious family, handsome, charming, said exactly what I wanted to hear. I nearly married him. She stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city of Houston slowly waking beneath the morning sun. One day before the wedding, I found a prenup agreement he had hidden in his briefcase. He'd hired his own lawyer to draft it, with clauses that, if I signed, would give him control of 30% of my assets the moment we married. Darius stayed silent. He didn't know what to say. "That was when I understood," Victoria continued, her voice lower. "No one wants me. They only want what I have, my name, my wealth, my power. No one sees Victoria. They only see the sterling name." She turned and looked directly at Darius. "But you're different." "Me?" Darius couldn't hide his shock. I'm just the janitor, ma'am. Exactly. Victoria nodded. You're the only person in this building who wants nothing from me. You don't flatter. You don't try to get close. You even avoid looking at me whenever I pass by. I just thought that was polite. That's honesty. Victoria stepped closer. 8 months, Darius. I've watched you for 8 months. You work hard, you never complain. You don't steal, not even a pen. And every night at exactly 11, you video call your daughter, no matter how exhausted you are. Darius felt stripped bare. She knew everything about him. I also know about Keisha, Victoria said, her tone softening slightly. I know when she left, with whom, and where she is now. I know you have never said one bad word about her in front of Maya. No matter what she did. Maya doesn't need to know, Darius murmured. She's lost enough already. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, as if he had just passed an invisible test. That's why I chose you. You're not perfect, but you're decent. And in my world, decency is rarer than diamonds. She pulled the chair across from her and sat down, for the first time, at eye level with Darius. I'm 41, Darius. My biological clock is counting down. The board of directors, those old men who worked with my father before I was even born, are waiting for me to fail. They want me to be heirless so they can tear apart the company my father spent his life building. So you need a child to prove the sterling legacy will continue. Victoria nodded. And I need a father I can trust. Someone who isn't greedy. Someone without political ambitions. Someone who will disappear once it's all over, living his own life with enough money to never look back. Darius felt as if he were standing at a cliff's edge. On one side were all the values he'd been raised with: honor, integrity, dignity. On the other side was his daughter, lying in a hospital bed, counting down the days. What if I refuse? Victoria tilted her head slightly, her gaze unwavering. Then you may walk away. No one will ever know about this conversation. You'll continue working as usual, and She paused. I'll find another way. And Maya? That is not my concern. Victoria's voice turned icy again. I am offering a business deal, Darius, not charity. Darius lowered his head. He looked down at his worn work boots, then at Victoria's expensive heels. Two worlds, brutally opposite. I need time to think. Victoria stood and returned behind her desk. You have 24 hours, she said without looking at him. After that, this door closes forever. Darius walked out of the office like a sleepwalker. The secretary eyed him with curiosity, but asked nothing. The elevator carried him down, returning him to the world of ordinary people. But Darius knew. From that moment on, he was no longer ordinary. He had been invited into a game whose rules he did not understand, and the price of losing might be his daughter's life. On the 47th floor, Victoria stood by the window, watching Darius's small figure step out of the building. She hadn't told him everything. She hadn't mentioned the sleepless nights in her empty penthouse, the echo of her own voice in rooms far too large, the feeling of being surrounded by hundreds of employees, yet having not a single friend. And she hadn't mentioned what Dr. Raymond Pierce told her 2 weeks ago, that if she wanted a child, this might be her last chance. That time was no longer on her side. That sometimes those who have everything are the ones who have lost the most. Victoria placed her hand on the cold glass, looking down at the city she nearly owned. And for the first time in many years, she wondered whether there was something in this world that money truly couldn't buy. The answer, she knew now, rested in the hands of a janitor. Darius couldn't remember how he drove home. When he pushed open the door of the small apartment, the smell of medicine and thin porridge hit him immediately. His mother, Gloria, was sitting beside Maya's bed, patiently feeding her granddaughter spoon by spoon. Your dad's home, she said, her voice warm but weighed down by exhaustion. At 72, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her hands had already begun to tremble from early-stage Parkinson's, yet she still tried her best to help Darius take care of Maya whenever he worked nights. "Daddy!" Maya squeaked, her bright brown eyes lighting up like two tiny stars. But her voice was weak, and her pale brown skin made Darius feel as if someone were crushing his heart. He walked over and kissed her forehead gently. "Did you sleep well?" "I dreamed you bought me a big house," Maya whispered, "with a garden and a swing and a dog too." Darius swallowed hard. "I'll buy it for you someday, I promise." Gloria looked at her son with worried eyes. She knew something was wrong. 32 years of motherhood had taught her how to read every flicker in Darius's face. "Maya, sweetheart, get a little more sleep," she said, brushing the child's curly hair. "Grandma needs to talk to your dad." Maya nodded obediently, her eyes already drooping. Darius pulled the blanket up for her, then followed his mother to the small balcony. The apartment was on the 4th floor, overlooking an alley full of trash and noise from the bar down the street. But it was still the best place Darius could afford with his current salary. "What's going on, son?" Gloria asked, her trembling hands gripping the iron railing. Darius stayed silent for a long time. He didn't know where to begin. "Mom, if I had a chance to save Maya, but that chance required me to do something I'm not sure is right or wrong, what do you think I should do?" She looked at him, her aging eyes still sharp. "What are you talking about? Be clearer." "I can't say the details," Darius shook his head. "It has to do with someone very wealthy, someone who could pay for Maya's entire surgery, everything, but in return—" He couldn't finish. Gloria went quiet for a moment, then asked, "Is it illegal?" "No." "Does it hurt anyone?" Darius thought of Victoria, the icy eyes hiding loneliness, the stories she told, the wounds she couldn't fully conceal. "I don't know, Mom. I really don't." Gloria exhaled slowly, turning her eyes back toward the apartment, where Maya was sleeping, her small chest rising and falling with effort. "You know what your father died of, right?" Darius nodded. His father, James Washington, had died 5 years ago of lung cancer. A mechanic who worked for 40 years, never took a vacation, never complained once. "Your father was the kindest man I've ever known," Gloria said, her voice trembling slightly. "He worked his whole life, never owed anyone a cent, never did anything wrong, and he died in the cheapest hospital room simply because we couldn't afford better care." She turned to Darius, her eyes reddening. "I loved your father. I'm proud of him. But sometimes I wonder if he had been a little more flexible, a little more willing to compromise. Would he still be alive today?" A sharp pain shot through Darius's chest. "What are you trying to say?" She took his hand, her weathered brown fingers wrapping around his, and squeezed it gently. "I don't know what that person wants from you, but I know one thing." She directed her eyes toward Maya. "That child is all we have left. If there's a way to save her without selling your soul to the devil, then, son, think very carefully before turning it down." She stood, placing a gentle hand on Darius's shoulder. "I can't decide for you. This is your life. But whatever you choose, I'll stand with you." Then she went back inside, leaving Darius alone under Houston's ashen sky. That night, Darius didn't sleep. He sat beside Maya's bed, listening to every labored breath she took. The heart monitor, a loaner from the hospital, beeped steadily like a death clock counting down. The doctor said Maya might not make it another 6 months without surgery. 6 months. 180 days. Darius had tried everything. He applied for a bank loan, denied because he had no collateral. He called Keisha. She wouldn't answer. He created a fundraising page, raised a few $1,000s before disappearing among countless other desperate stories. He even considered selling a kidney, but it was illegal, and the black market was far too dangerous. Darius looked down at his calloused hands, dark, strong hands that had cleaned thousands of square feet of flooring, repaired hundreds of old cars, held Maya since she was just a small, fragile newborn. Could these hands actually save his daughter? Then he thought of Victoria, a woman who had everything, yet had nothing. A woman betrayed so deeply she no longer believed in love. A woman who was the most powerful figure in Houston, yet also the loneliest. Victoria wanted a child. Not love, not marriage, just a child. And he could give her that. Darius got up and walked to the window. The city lights spilled across the night sky like a million fallen stars. His father had lived a life of unbending principles, integrity, honesty, no compromise. And he died in poverty. Darius didn't want Maya crying at her father's grave the way he cried at his own father's. He pulled out his phone and looked at the business card Victoria's secretary had given him, the personal number of the most powerful woman in Texas. His hands trembled violently. His heart pounded like a war drum. He pressed call. The phone rang 3 times. "Have you made your decision?" Victoria's voice came through, cold, distant. Darius took a deep breath, looking at Maya sleeping, her angelic face dim under the weak yellow light. "Yes," he said, his voice hoarse. "I agree." Silence lasted for a few seconds. Then Victoria replied, without the slightest change in her tone. "Tomorrow morning, 8:00, I will send someone to pick you up." The call ended. Darius stood there, phone still in his hand, staring into the Houston night. He had crossed a boundary, one he could never return from, and he had no idea that from this moment on, his life would be forever changed, not just because of the deal with Victoria, but because sometimes, when 2 lonely people brush against each other by accident, what happens next is something no one on earth can ever predict. At exactly 8 in the morning, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up in front of Darius's apartment. He had been up since 6, showered, and put on the neatest clothes he owned. A white shirt that had started to fade, and an old pair of dress pants. Before leaving, he leaned down to kiss Maya's forehead as she slept, told his mother he had to go out for something, then closed the door behind him. The driver stepped out and opened the car door without saying a word. Inside there was the faint smell of expensive leather and the cool air from the AC. When Darius sat down, he felt as if he had just stepped onto another planet. The car glided through the familiar streets of Houston, then turned into River Oaks, where mansions hid behind tall fences and heavy iron gates. Darius had never set foot there. He only knew it was where the wealthiest people in Texas lived. The Mercedes stopped in front of an enormous gate. A security camera shifted, scanned the license plate, and then the gate slowly opened. A stone-paved driveway stretched for a good 100 meters, lined on both sides with towering oak trees. At the end of the driveway, Victoria Sterling's mansion appeared like a castle. Darius could hardly believe his eyes. The house, no, palace was the only right word, was built in a Mediterranean style, with white domes, soaring columns, and huge windows facing a bright blue pool in the back. The lawn was trimmed to perfection, like a velvet carpet. Stone statues stood scattered across the garden, motionless like silent sentries. The driver opened the door. "Mr. Washington, this way, please." Darius stepped out, his legs slightly shaky. The front door opened and a middle-aged woman in a housekeeper's uniform appeared. "Mr. Washington, I'm Patricia. Mrs. Sterling is waiting for you in the sitting room." Darius followed Patricia across a vast foyer. The polished white marble floor reflected the light from a massive crystal chandelier above. Oil paintings lined the walls, each one probably worth as much as his entire apartment. The air was cold and so still it felt strange. No laughter, no chatter, none of the sounds of a normal home, only the echo of Patricia's heels in the empty space. Victoria was sitting in the living room by a stone fireplace. She wore a light gray dress, her blonde hair falling loosely over her shoulders. her blue eyes following his every step. "Sit," she said, pointing to the chair across from her. Darius sat down. The chair was so soft he felt as if his body were sinking into clouds. "Have you had breakfast?" No, ma'am." Victoria gave Patricia a brief nod. A few minutes later, a small table was wheeled in, loaded with toast, fresh fruit, and dishes Darius didn't even know the names of. "Eat," Victoria said. "You'll need your strength." Darius didn't understand what she meant, but he was so hungry he couldn't refuse. He picked up a slice of toast and tried to eat slowly, as politely as he could. Victoria watched him, her gaze as if she were evaluating something very valuable. "Today, Dr. Raymond Pierce will come to perform a health check on you," she said. "Blood tests. Full examination. I need to be sure you are completely healthy before we proceed." Darius nodded. "I understand. After that, my lawyer will have you sign a non-disclosure agreement. If you break any of its terms, you will lose everything and face very serious legal consequences. Do you understand?" "Yes." Victoria tilted her head slightly, her eyes as sharp as knives. "You have no questions? No worries? No doubts at all?" Darius put the toast down. "Ma'am, I spent the whole night thinking. I know what I'm doing and I know why I'm doing it." He looked straight at Victoria. "My daughter is waiting. I no longer have the luxury of doubt or hesitation." Victoria was silent for a moment, then nodded. For a brief second, a flicker of satisfaction passed through her cold blue eyes. "Good. I like people who know what they want." Dr. Raymond Pierce arrived in the afternoon. He was a man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a calm face. He brought a whole team of nurses and a series of medical devices, as if preparing for surgery rather than a simple health check. They drew blood, took his blood pressure, listened to his heart and lungs. They asked about his family medical history, his diet, his daily habits, even his sex life. Darius answered everything, feeling as though each invisible layer of armor he had was being peeled away. After the medical team left, Dr. Pierce stayed behind to speak with Victoria in her study. Darius sat alone in the living room, his eyes wandering over every detail of the luxurious mansion. That was when he noticed. Not a single family photograph. No wedding pictures. No childhood photos, no snapshots with friends, only art and expensive decorative pieces. Beautiful, perfect, but soulless. This mansion felt more like a museum than a home. Darius stood and walked over to the large window overlooking the garden. The pool shimmered blue in the afternoon sun. A bird landed on the pool's edge, tilted its head to look around, then flapped its wings and flew away. "What are you thinking about?" Darius turned. Victoria was standing behind him, arms crossed. "I was thinking," he hesitated, then answered honestly, "this house is very beautiful, but it's also very quiet." Victoria stepped forward, standing beside him. In the glass reflection, Darius could see them side by side, his tall, dark frame next to her pale, slender figure. Two people from entirely different worlds. "Silence is something I can buy," she said, her voice tinged with faint bitterness. "Noise, chaos, uncontrolled emotions, those are things I do not need." "But you need a child." Victoria turned to him. For a moment, something softened in her eyes, a hint of fragility she quickly concealed. "A child is for the future, for the legacy, for things bigger than personal feelings." Darius said nothing. He wondered whether she truly believed what she had just said, or if she was trying to convince herself. "Your test results are excellent," Victoria continued, changing the subject. "Dr. Pierce confirmed you are completely healthy. No genetic diseases, no concerning issues. So, when will we start?" Victoria looked out the window. "Next week. I need time to prepare some things. In the meantime, you'll stay here." "Here?" Darius was startled. "But my daughter—" "Tomorrow, Maya will be transferred to the best hospital in Houston," Victoria said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "All expenses will be covered by me. Your mother will also be given comfortable accommodation near the hospital so she can care for her." Darius parted his lips, about to say something, but Victoria had already turned away. "Patricia will show you to your room. Rest. You'll need your strength for what's coming." She left the room, leaving Darius alone in the vast space. He looked around the mansion, feeling like a small fish dropped into the open ocean. Everything was happening too fast, too overwhelming, far beyond his understanding. But when he thought of Maya, of her getting treatment at the best hospital, Darius knew he had no right to complain. He had chosen to step into this world, and now he had to accept its rules. That night, Darius lay on the largest bed he had ever seen, in a guest room as big as his old apartment. The AC hummed softly. The sheets were spotless and white, as soft as clouds. Everything was so perfect it felt unreal, but he couldn't sleep. He lay there, staring up at the high ceiling, his mind spinning with images of Maya, his mother, and whatever awaited him ahead. Darius wasn't entirely sure what he was feeling. Fear, guilt, pity, or some strange emotion he didn't yet dare to name. He only knew one thing. From this moment on, his life and Victoria's were bound together. And that bond might change them both in ways neither of them could possibly imagine. A week passed like a strange dream. Darius lived in Victoria's mansion, treated like an honored guest. Every meal was prepared by her private chef. New clothes were brought to his room. He didn't have to do anything except wait. But the waiting was heavier than any physical labor he had ever done. During the day, Victoria vanished into meetings, business trips, and phone calls that lasted for hours. She ran the sterling capital empire like a machine that never stopped. Meanwhile, Darius wandered around the mansion like a shadow. Every day, he video-called Maya. She had been transferred to Mercy General Hospital, one of the best in Houston. Her room had a window overlooking the garden, a large TV, and nurses who checked in every hour. "Daddy, it's fun here," Maya said through the screen, her brown eyes shining. "The nurse gives me ice cream every day, and Grandma tells me stories every night." Darius smiled, trying to hide the tightness in his throat. "Be good, sweetheart. Daddy will visit you soon." "Where are you, Daddy? Why don't you come home?" Darius froze. He didn't know how to answer. "Daddy's working far away, baby. A very important job. To get money to help you get better." "What job, Daddy?" "You don't need to worry. I promise everything will be okay." Maya nodded, trusting him completely. And that trust tore Darius apart. He was lying to his daughter, and he hated himself for it. On the 7th night, Victoria called him into her study. The room was on the 2nd floor, with bookshelves stretching up to the ceiling and a massive oak desk in the center. Victoria sat behind it, a glass of red wine swirling in front of her. "Sit," she said, pointing to the chair across from her. Darius pulled the chair out and sat down. He realized this was the first time the two of them had spoken privately since he moved in. "The final test results are in," Victoria began, her voice as calm and cold as ever. "Everything is in order. We can begin." Darius nodded, his throat suddenly dry. "Begin when?" "Tonight." Silence dropped into the room. Darius felt his heartbeat speeding with each second. Victoria stood, walked to the window. The moonlight poured in, coating her figure in a faint silver sheen. "Are you afraid?" she asked, still facing away from him. Darius didn't answer immediately. He sat there thinking, then decided to be honest. "Yes." Victoria turned back. "Afraid of what?" "Of many things," Darius said slowly. "Afraid I don't know if this is right or wrong. Afraid I'll regret it later. Afraid—" He hesitated. "Afraid of you." "Afraid of me?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. Not afraid you'll hurt me, Darius quickly clarified, but afraid that I don't understand you. I don't know what you really want. Victoria was silent for a long time. Then she did something Darius never expected. She laughed, not the cold, calculated laugh he had seen before, but a short, bitter laugh, like someone laughing at themselves. "You're the first person to say that to me," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Everyone fears me, but no one dares say it out loud." She walked closer and sat in the chair beside him. It was the first time they had ever sat this close. "You want to know what I truly want?" Victoria turned the glass slowly in her hand. "I'm not even sure anymore." Darius stared at her, surprised. "I thought you always knew what you wanted." "You run an entire corporation." "Running a corporation is easy," Victoria cut him off. "There are rules, numbers, strategies. But life—" She shook her head. "Life doesn't have a manual." She took a sip of wine, her gaze drifting far away. "Do you know when I started running the company?" "When?" "When I was 26. My father had a stroke and became bedridden. The board wanted to sell everything, and I, a girl fresh out of college, had to stand up against those wolves in the financial world." "And you won," Darius said quietly. "I won." Victoria nodded. "But it took me 15 years to win. 15 years without rest, without friends, without love, only work, work, and more work." She set the wine glass down and looked directly at Darius. "Do you know the worst part? That by the time I finally had room to live my life, I realized I had forgotten how." Darius stayed silent. He simply listened. "This house has 12 bedrooms," Victoria continued. "I use one. I have 5 cars. I drive one. I can buy anything in this world, but I cannot buy a single evening of dinner with a family." Her voice tightened. "My mother died when I was 12. Breast cancer." Victoria spoke slowly. She lay in her hospital bed, holding my hand, and said, "Victoria, don't be like me. Don't let life pass before you've lived it." I promised her, and in the end I still broke that promise. Her blue eyes glimmered under the light. She was crying, but refusing to let the tears fall. "That's why I want a child," she whispered. "Not just for legacy, not for the board, but because I want someone to love. Someone who can't leave me because of money. Someone who belongs with me." She looked at Darius, and for the first time, he saw real vulnerability in her eyes. "Do you think I'm insane?" Darius slowly shook his head. "No. I think you're lonely. Lonely enough to do anything just to not be lonely anymore." Victoria held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Perhaps you're the first person who has ever truly understood me." That night, they walked into Victoria's bedroom. A vast room with a king-size bed draped in white silk sheets, heavy velvet curtains covering the windows, and flickering candles filling the air with a soft lavender scent. But there was nothing romantic about it. Only 2 lonely people standing across from each other in a heavy silence. Victoria slipped off her coat, revealing a black silk nightgown. She was beautiful, beautiful in the flawless, cold way of a Greek sculpture. Darius stood still, his limbs stiff, unsure what to do. "You don't have to love me," Victoria said, her voice turning cold again, as if rebuilding a wall. "You only have to do what needs to be done." Darius stepped closer, looking into her blue eyes, searching for something beneath the ice. "Are you sure this is what you want?" Victoria didn't answer. She simply nodded. And that night, in the bedroom of the most powerful woman in Texas, 2 lonely people came together. Not out of love, not out of desire, but out of an agreement, a transaction, an exchange. At least that's what they both tried to tell themselves. But sometimes, things that begin as a deal end in ways no one ever expects. That night, as Victoria lay in the dark with her back to Darius, she whispered something so softly he thought he imagined it. Thank you for not looking at me like an object." Darius didn't reply, but he heard every word. And for the first time, he felt something shift inside him. Not guilt, not fear, but compassion. Compassion for a woman who had everything, yet had never once been truly loved. The following weeks passed with a strange rhythm. During the day, Darius went to the hospital to visit Maya. He sat by her bed, read her stories, watched cartoons with her, and tried to act as if everything was still normal. At night, he returned to Victoria's mansion. They met in the bedroom, did what needed to be done. Then each went back to their own world. At least, that was how things were in the beginning. But slowly, something began to change. One evening, after leaving the bedroom, Darius went down to the kitchen to get a drink of water. He didn't expect to find Victoria there too, sitting alone at the dining table with a bowl of instant noodles in front of her. Instant noodles. The billionaire who owned an empire was eating instant noodles at midnight. "Ma'am?" Darius couldn't hide his surprise. Victoria looked up, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of embarrassment on her face, an expression Darius had never seen on her before. "The chef's gone home, and I don't know how to cook anything else," she said, her voice sounding almost like she was defending herself. Darius opened the fridge. Inside, it was full of fine ingredients: Wagyu beef, fresh seafood, organic vegetables. "Would you like me to cook something for you?" Victoria looked at him as if he had just said something utterly strange. "You can cook?" Darius smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since he'd stepped into the mansion. "I'm a single dad, ma'am. If I couldn't cook, my daughter would starve." He took a few eggs, some cheese, turned on the stove, and started making fried eggs. The smell of butter melting in the hot pan spread through the huge kitchen. Victoria sat there silently, watching him work, her eyes filled with curiosity. "Where did you learn to cook?" "From my mother," Darius replied, his hands moving quickly over the pan. "When I was a kid, I used to stand and watch her cook. Sunday dinners at Grandma's house. That's where I learned everything. She said a real man is someone who knows how to take care of himself and the people he loves." He placed the plate of eggs in front of Victoria. "It's not anything fancy, but I'm sure it's better than instant noodles." Victoria looked at the eggs, then at him. For a moment, her eyes softened. "Thank you." It was the first time she had thanked him without the cover of darkness. From that night on, things began to change. Victoria no longer left immediately after they had been together. Sometimes she stayed, sitting on the bed or on the sofa, and started talking. She talked about work, about meetings stretched tight like a wire, about rivals waiting for a chance to bring her down, about the decisions she had to make every day, decisions that could affect thousands of people. And Darius listened. He didn't understand much about finance, stocks, or multi-million-dollar deals. But he understood what it felt like to be crushed by pressure. He understood loneliness. He understood what it meant to carry a world on your shoulders with no one to lean on. "Don't you get bored listening to me?" Victoria asked one night. Darius shook his head. "No one gets bored when someone trusts them enough to share, ma'am." Victoria looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You're a very strange man, Darius Washington." "I'm just a janitor, ma'am." "No." Victoria shook her head slightly. "You're more than that. You just haven't realized it yet." One afternoon, while Darius was at the hospital visiting Maya, she suddenly asked, "Dad, who's the person paying for my treatment?" Darius froze. "Why do you ask that?" "Grandma said someone kind helped our family," Maya said, her clear brown eyes fixed on him. "I want to say thank you to them." Darius swallowed hard. He didn't know how to answer. "It's a very special person, sweetheart," he said slowly. "Someday I'll tell you everything." "Is that person kind, Dad?" Darius thought of Victoria, The cold eyes, the rare smile, the shaky thank you in the dark. "That person is complicated, honey," he said, "but deep down I think they're a good person. It's just that life has made them forget how to show it." Maya nodded, her face thoughtful, like a little girl far older than her years. "Like Mommy Keisha, Dad?" Darius's heart clenched. His daughter still said Mommy Keisha, not Mom. Since the day Keisha left, Maya had never called anyone else Mom again. "No, sweetheart," Darius said gently. "This person is different." "Different how?" Darius stayed quiet for a moment. "Mommy Keisha left because she was afraid, but this person stayed, even though they've lived their whole life in fear." A week later, Dr. Raymond Pierce returned to the mansion. Darius was sitting in the living room when he arrived, holding a black leather briefcase, his face serious. Victoria invited the doctor into her study. The door closed. Darius couldn't hear what they were saying, but he saw Patricia, the housekeeper, walk past with a briefly tense look on her face. Half an hour later, Dr. Pierce left. Victoria still didn't appear. Darius waited. An hour. 2. Still no sign of her. Finally, he decided to go look for her. He knocked on the study door. No answer. Darius pushed the door open and stepped inside. Victoria was sitting by the window, her back to him. Her shoulders were trembling. She was crying. Darius had never seen Victoria cry. Not even the night she talked about her mother had she allowed her tears to fall. He walked closer, awkwardness twisting inside him. "Mrs. Sterling?" Victoria didn't turn around. Her voice was hoarse, choked. Dr. Pierce said, "I'm pregnant." Darius felt as if someone had slammed a hammer into his chest. That's good news, isn't it, ma'am?" Victoria turned around. Her face was streaked with tears, but what he saw in her eyes wasn't joy. It was fear. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "I've been pregnant twice before. Both times—" She trailed off. Darius stood frozen. "Twice before?" Victoria nodded, the tears starting up again. "The first time I was 28, with William, the man I almost married. I miscarried at 10 weeks. After that, I found out the truth about him and called off the wedding." She took a breath, trying to steady herself. "The second time, I was 35. I decided to do it on my own, artificial insemination. But it was an ectopic pregnancy. I almost died. The doctor said that after that, my chances of getting pregnant were nearly 0. Victoria looked at Darius, her eyes red. "You are my last chance, Darius. And now Dr. Pierce says the embryo has implanted in the right place. It's developing normally." Her voice broke. "But with my history, the risk of complications is very high. He says I have to rest completely. No stress, no overworking." She let out a laugh, a bitter, broken sound. "No overworking? Does he know who I am? I can't stop. If I stop, they'll tear the company apart." Darius didn't stop to think. He stepped closer and knelt down in front of her. "You won't be alone," he said, his voice steadier than it had ever been. "I know I'm just a janitor. I don't understand business, finance, or your world. But I know how to take care of people. I know how to stay by someone's side when they need it." Victoria stared at him, eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You don't have to do that. This isn't part of the deal." "I know," Darius nodded. "But some things matter more than a deal." He stood and looked out the window. "The baby you're carrying, that's my child too. I can't pretend it doesn't exist. I can't walk away the way Keisha did." Victoria was silent for a long time. Then she did something Darius didn't expect. She reached out and took his hand. Her pale fingers intertwined with his dark ones. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not looking at me like a contract." Darius didn't say anything. He just held her hand tighter. And in that moment, the line between a cold agreement and something deeper warmer, began to blur. From that day on, everything began to change in ways neither Darius nor Victoria could have predicted. Darius was no longer just the one fulfilling the agreement. He became the person who stayed by Victoria's side every day, the one who reminded her to take her vitamins on time, the one who made sure she ate proper meals, the one who stood right in front of her desk whenever she tried to work until midnight. At first, Victoria resisted fiercely. "I don't need anyone to take care of me," she said, her voice cold as steel. "I've taken care of myself for 20 years. "And you've had 2 miscarriages," Darius replied, his tone unyielding. "Do you want a third to happen?" Victoria glared at him, but then she fell silent, unable to argue back. Gradually, she began getting used to his presence, used to someone asking, "Have you eaten?" Used to someone waiting outside her office door to say, "It's time to sleep." Used to someone who genuinely cared about her as a living human being, not as a billionaire CEO holding an entire empire in her hands. And the walls she had spent years building around herself began to crack. One afternoon, Darius was making tea in the kitchen when he heard Victoria speaking on the phone in her office. Her voice was tense, sharp. "I already said no, Mr. Crawford. That decision is final." A few seconds of silence. Then Victoria continued, her tone icy. "Are you threatening me? Do you think I'm afraid of you? Do you think the board can do anything to me? I hold 52% of this company. You and your old cronies can hold meetings until your bones turn to dust, and it still won't change a thing." Then came the sound of a phone being slammed onto the desk, followed by heavy breathing. Darius knocked gently and stepped inside, a cup of hot tea in hand. Victoria was sitting behind her desk, her hands covering her head. When she looked up, her face was pale. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she said, but her voice trembled. "It's just, the vultures are starting to smell blood." Darius placed the cup in front of her. "What happened?" Victoria hesitated for a moment. If this had been before, she would never have shared company matters with an outsider. But now, "Crawford, the vice chairman of the board," she said tiredly. "He was my father's close friend. Ever since my father died, he's believed he should be the one running the company, not me." "What does he want?" "He noticed I've been reducing my workload, missing a few important meetings, that I'm changing." Victoria looked up at Darius. "He suspects something's wrong, and he's trying to dig until he finds it." A cold chill ran through Darius's spine. "Does he know about us yet?" "No." Victoria shook her head. "But he has people watching me, I'm certain." She stood up and walked to the window. "If he finds out about our agreement, he'll turn it into a weapon. He'll leak it to the press, to the shareholders, to the entire world." Her voice was bitter. "Billionaire CEO pays janitor to give her a child. Can you imagine the headlines?" Darius stayed silent. He had never thought that far ahead. He'd focused only on Maya, on the surgery, on saving his daughter, and had forgotten that Victoria had everything to lose. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I never wanted to bring trouble to you." Victoria turned around, looking straight at him. "You didn't bring trouble. The trouble was already there long before you came." She sighed. "I'm just tired of fighting alone." Darius stepped closer. "You're not alone anymore." Victoria looked at him, something flickering in her eyes, something she didn't dare name. "Why are you being so kind to me? You already have what you needed. Your daughter is receiving treatment. All you have to do is follow the contract. Exactly." "Nothing more." Darius was silent for a moment before answering. "Because you remind me of someone." "Who?" "My father," Darius said. "He was the kind of man who carried everything alone. Never complained, never asked for help. And in the end, he died with no one holding his hand." He looked straight at Victoria. "I don't want anyone else to end up like that, not even you." Victoria stood there, silent. Then she did something she hadn't done with anyone in many years. She stepped forward and rested her head on Darius's shoulder. She said nothing. She simply leaned on him, seeking a little warmth in the arms of the man she had hired to give her a child. Darius didn't speak either. He simply stood there, letting her lean. And in that moment, they both understood that whatever was happening between them had gone far beyond the boundaries of an agreement. In the days that followed, Darius began to see more clearly who Victoria truly was. She wasn't just the cold billionaire on stage making decisions with a signature. She was also the woman who jolted awake at 3 in the morning from nightmares about her mother. She was the woman who sat alone at night reading children's books, the same ones her mother used to read to her. She was the woman who kept an old, worn teddy bear in her bedside drawer, the last gift her mother gave her before she died. One night, Darius woke abruptly to the sound of muffled crying. He followed the sound down the hallway to a room at the very end, a room he had never seen open since the day he moved in. The door was slightly ajar. Darius pushed it gently. Victoria was sitting on the floor, clutching an old wooden box, tears streaming down her face. Darius tapped lightly on the doorframe. Victoria looked up quickly and wiped her tears. What are you doing here?" "I heard—" Darius hesitated. "Are you all right?" Victoria looked down at the box in her lap. Inside were old photographs, a few handwritten letters, and a tarnished silver bracelet. "Today is my mother's death anniversary," she said, her voice raw. "It's been 29 years. Darius stepped into the room and sat beside her. This room was unlike any other in the mansion. No luxurious furniture, no expensive art, just a small single bed, a little table, and the walls covered with photographs. Photos of a gentle, smiling, blonde woman holding a little girl in her arms. "This was my mother's room," Victoria whispered. "I kept everything the same since the day she died. No one comes in here, not even the cleaners." She handed Darius a picture. "This was the last photo we took together, a week before she passed." Darius looked at it. Victoria was around 11 or 12, smiling brightly beside her mother. The eyes of the little girl in the picture were bright and innocent, nothing like the coldness of the woman beside him now. "She was beautiful," Darius said. "She was the most wonderful person I ever knew," Victoria whispered. "She didn't care about money or power. She just wanted a happy family. She wanted to see me grow up. She wanted grandchildren to hold." Her voice broke, but none of that ever came true. Darius didn't know what to say. He simply sat there quietly, letting the silence between them become something other than loneliness. "You know," Victoria said after a long while, "the baby I'm carrying, if it's a girl, I want to name her after my mother." "What was her name?" "Helen." Victoria smiled faintly through her tears. "Helen Rose Sterling." Darius's heart thudded hard. Helen. Exactly the same sound as Maya's middle name. His daughter's full name was Maya Helen Washington. He didn't say it aloud, but the coincidence felt like an invisible thread suddenly tying them together. "That's a beautiful name," he said softly. Victoria nodded, and then she did something she hadn't dared do with anyone else for many years. She began telling Darius about her childhood, about afternoons reading in the garden with her mom, about simple family dinners before her father became consumed by work, about her childhood dreams, not of becoming a CEO or a billionaire, but of having a normal life with a normal family. And Darius listened until the first rays of morning slipped through the window. That night, for the first time in many years, Victoria fell asleep with her head resting on Darius's shoulder. And for the first time in a very long time, she didn't have nightmares. 2 months passed. Victoria's pregnancy progressed so steadily that even she didn't dare believe it. Every week, Dr. Pierce came to the mansion for a checkup. He always nodded in satisfaction, and sometimes even allowed himself a faint smile, rare for someone who had worked in medicine for so many years. "Everything's good, very good," he would often say. Victoria's belly had begun to curve slightly, just enough to be noticeable beneath the soft fabric of the loose dresses she'd been wearing lately. A small, fragile curve, but it was the miracle she had waited for her entire life. And Maya, Darius's little fighter, had finally made it through the biggest surgery of her life. The news from the hospital came on a Tuesday morning. Darius's legs gave out when he heard the words, "The surgery was successful." His knees hit the floor right there in the crowded hallway, both hands covering his face. He didn't remember how long he cried. He only remembered the head surgeon placing a hand on his shoulder, his voice deep and gentle. "She's very strong. We did everything we could." And she responded. The operation had lasted 8 hours. 8 hours that felt like an entire lifetime to Darius. But now, at last, there was an answer. Maya needed a few more weeks to recover before being discharged. But with each passing day, Darius watched the color return to her cheeks. Her voice grew more cheerful, her laughter filling the hospital room every time Darius visited. "Daddy," Maya asked one day, her brown eyes sparkling with hope, "when can I go home?" "Soon, Daddy's princess." Darius hugged her tightly. "Very soon." He kissed her forehead, feeling a wave of relief spread through his chest. For the first time in many years, Darius felt as if life was opening a new door for him, one that was warm and full of hope. He had no idea that while he was savoring that small joy, another storm was quietly forming. A storm that would not come from the hospital, but from the place he least expected, the world of Victoria Sterling. My dear friend, if you've stayed with me until this very minute, perhaps you feel it too. The story between Darius, Maya, and Victoria, which began as a cold, precise agreement, is no longer just a transaction. It has become something harder to name, harder to measure, and perhaps harder to escape. Will Victoria be strong enough to protect the child growing inside her while still safeguarding the empire she sacrificed her entire youth to build? Will Darius, the man who seemed to enter that world solely for his daughter's sake, truly have the courage to stand between two halves of his life? On one side, Maya, the only thing he has, and on the other, Victoria, a woman who seems untouchable, yet is more fragile than anyone. And these peaceful days, how long can they really last before the next storm hits? If you want to hear the next part of this story, to see which choices will open a new path for all three of them, don't forget, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and leave me a comment. I want part 2. Who knows? Maybe your comment will be the very reason part 2 comes out sooner than you think.